What's up, everybody? Phantom Darkness 135 here with you. Today we are doing a very special video. I got a request to do another programming tutorial. It's been a while since we've done one, back when we did the Python game, and a lot of my fellow YouTube walkthrough-ers wanted to see the code I have for a program I wrote. Very simple program, less than, I think it's about, let me see, about 113 lines. And what it does is when you go to upload your video, if you're the kind of YouTuber who has the same genre or format of video, you kind of get bored doing the same sort of format of title all the time. Why don't I just show you what I'm talking about here? So let me open what I'm talking about here. So if we go to my videos, it'd be much faster if I do this. So this is the basic format I use for every single video, depending on what it is. We have a title, we have a description. If someone suggested the game, I'll put their username there. We have a game link to the game. I have a copyright note that I wrote that I put in there for safety, and then you have your tags separated by commas for YouTube. And when you go to upload your video, you have to do that every single time, and it gets annoying if you have to do it from scratch every single time. So today, I'm going to show you how to make and code your own program that will make that a little easier by putting it in the format I just showed you in a notepad document. And I'm going to try to explain it so that you don't need any prior coding experience. I don't know if I'll be too good at that, but I'm hoping that is my objective in this, is to make it so easy that even if you've never coded before, especially in C++, you will understand. So with all that being said, I am going to be using this Visual Studio 2012 for Windows Desktop. I'll put a link in the description to download that. It is free. You need to send in your email to get a key, but it is totally free. Don't be fooled. And I think that's all I got in my notes for the intro. We've gone on long enough. And I'm not promising it's going to be the cleanest project. If you are a coder, you're probably going to be criticizing it at everything along the way. But I open it up to you to make it better for yourself. So what we're going to do is we're going to start a new project, and you can use any editor you want. You don't have to use Visual Studio, but I'm going to use it. And we'll do Visual C++, a console application. We'll call it YouTube description generator. And I invite you, if you have any questions at all, to put them in the comments or messages, and I'll do my best to answer as many as I can. You'll get a little wizard, and you want to make it an empty project, completely empty. And it will build that for us. And your screen may look a little different too, because I have everything on auto hide. So what we're going to do is open the Solution Explorer over here. If you don't see those windows, you can go under View, and then there'll be other windows that you can put the Solution bar or Solution Explorer up if you don't see it. When you get to the Solution Explorer, you want to click on Source Files, right-click, Add New Item, Visual C++, C++ file, and we'll just leave it at source. That'll work. And then it will automatically put it in your folder for you. And just for semantics, we're going to put a little description here. This program prompts for the characteristics. I'm going to stop reading now. You guys can read. Alright, so easy peasy. Now the first thing we're going to do is include some classes and libraries that the Windows, I can't even think of the name right now. When you use Visual Studio and the Windows .NET scheme, they give you a bunch of classes that we're going to need to use. So I'll explain these in a second after I put all the ones we need in. Include, we need a string stream. That's fun to say. And, oh, it's actually stream. And vectors, always fun. And lastly, a header file .h, which is windows.h. So, for those of you, again, I'm going to try to explain everything. I'm sorry if you get impatient. I'm going to try to explain everything in case someone's watching this who has no idea what's going on as best I can. So what these include statements do is they give us some libraries that are pre-made for us in the Windows kit. So if we can even right click and open them and see what they all include. So this is the IO stream. The IO stands for input output. So this will allow us to get input from the user by the keyboard and output to the console. Fstream is a file stream that we'll use to write into Notepad. String is, in case you're not familiar, you can either have a character, so like A, B, C, or D, or a string is basically a collection of characters put into one. So a word like string would actually be a collection of S plus T plus and so on and so forth. So the string is what we use to store words or titles, whatever. We'll be using it a lot in this one. The string stream we're going to use, I'll explain that when we get to it. And the vector is a collection of some sort. In this case, we're going to use it to collect our tags for the video. And the windows.h file will allow us to use the command to bring up Notepad so that the user doesn't have to worry about going through their files and searching for it. It'll just bring it up right in front of them as soon as the program completes. Last thing we're going to do in preparation is using namespace std, which is standard, contrary to what you were thinking. Why is it giving me a little red dot there? What you talking about? Okay, it went away. And that just allows us to not have to type. Instead of writing this, which is cout, so that'll print to the console, we can just write cout without the std and the scope operator there. So we're doing great so far. Now we're going to actually get to the meat of the program. We're going to declare some functions first. So these are function declarations. In programming, the declaration for a function is different from the definition. So right here, all we're going to do is tell the computer that this is actually called, well, the thing that will build our program is called the compiler. And we're going to tell the compiler that there's going to be functions with this name, with this return type, and with these arguments, but we won't say what they do yet. We're just going to tell the compiler that they will be in the program. So the first one we're going to use is, this is the return type. It's void. It doesn't return anything. Get video information. And in parentheses, we're going to put all the arguments or the things that we'll be sending to the function. And they're all going to be string reference. A string, if you put string title like that, what happens is when you send the argument to the function, I know this may sound like Chinese to some of you, bear with me. When you send the title variable to the function, it'll make a copy of it, and instead we want to put this ampersand here. That makes it a reference, and I'll explain that when we get to the point where we actually send it to the function, and you'll see, I think you'll understand a little better what's going on. So this is a character reference type choice. Again, this will make a lot more sense once we get down below a little more. And I'm going to space this out a little bit. A Boolean, or a bool, is any variable that contains a true or false statement. I'm going to name it is suggested, and you'll understand that. I don't know if suggested is a word, I'm going to be honest, but I'm going to name it that because that's what I built this program when I was first getting into programming, and that's why it's so messy. And I'm just copying it, and then here's going to be our vector. When you declare a vector, you put a vector and then the type of object that's going to go into it, in this case a string, and then we're going to do a reference, and we'll call that vector tags. And then we put a semicolon, and so that concludes our declaration. So we didn't tell it what the function is going to do, we're just telling it that it exists, what it's going to return, nothing, and what we're going to send to it, which is all this stuff. We have only one other function that compiles the information into the file, and it's called generate file, appropriately. And I think we can pretty much, let me see if we need to adjust this. We can pretty much type everything. We don't need the type choice, so we can do that. And let's see here, generate file, description, suggested, string, suggester, game link. And we don't need the tag, we just need the vector of tags, so we'll leave it right there. And then that's all we need for that one, and those are our functions, the only two functions we'll use outside of our main function. Now when you program, the main function is what the meat of the program, it's the body, and the other functions you want to, let me make sure I say this right. in object-oriented programming, which is what C++ is, an object-oriented programming language, you want to make sure that any code you make that does a specific task, like getting video information, you want to encapsulate it into a function so that if you need to use this function but none of this stuff in another program, you can just copy this function over. I know if you haven't coded before, it's going to sound like Chinese or whatever, but bear with me and you'll see what I'm talking about. So the main function is the main thing, that appropriately enough, that runs when we run a program, and it always returns an integer, usually 0 if it's run successfully, because that tells the programmer, it'll come up with a little message in the output box down here that the program returned 0, which tells the programmer that everything went well. So there's your explanation of that, and the main doesn't take any arguments in C++. So we're going to declare some variables here, and we're going to what's called initialize them. And what initializing is this statement right here is basically equivalent to, we have a string, we're declaring a string called title, and we're going to set its value to nothing, basically just 2 quotation marks to put it null, because if you don't initialize your variables and you accidentally use it, it can cause errors and crash your program. So that we have a string title, and these are all going to be strings, so we don't have to say string again. And I'm going to initialize them all to the null, 2 quotation marks. Suggestor, that doesn't sound like a word. I don't think that's a word. Game link, and I'm using Camel case. That's the standard for some people. You know, everyone has their own idiosyncrasies when they code, but I use Camel case for my variables. And so that gives us a string called title, a string called type, a string called description, a string called, and so on and so on. And remember that a string is just basically a word or a group of words, like a sentence or something like that. And then we're going to set up our vector of strings called tags, and we don't need to initialize that. It will take care of itself as long as we don't make any terrible mistakes. We're going to make a Boolean is suggested. We're going to have it initialized to false just in case if something goes wrong and we forget to ask the user. If the user doesn't specify if it's suggested, it will automatically go to false. Again, this will make a lot more sense once we get to the actual functions. And we have a character for type choice. We're going to initialize it W. Notice that characters that use single quotations versus strings that use double quotations. So that's all the variables we need. And then, because we have created 2 very encapsulated and very good functions, well, not very good, but semantically very good, we can just, let's see, description is suggested. So what we're doing, well, I'll explain in a second. Okay, so what we're doing is we're saying we're going to send get video information, which we defined up or declared up here. We're going to send it all these variables that we just initialize and establish up there. So since we use references, we included the ampersand instead of using just string like this. It literally is, usually if you just send it without the ampersand, it will make copies of these variables. It won't actually affect whatever these. So when this function returns, these will actually still be null. They'll only be changed within the function. Instead, when we use references, it will affect these variables in the main function directly and access them and change them. So when we come back to main, when this finishes, these will be changed to what we want them to be. And we're going to do the same with generate file right there. Oh, I thought it was going to type it for me. So we're going to send this one a few different ones though, since it was a little different in what we needed to send it. Why isn't it? Should auto-complete it for me, but it's not. Okay, suggestor. Oh, I guess it's different from C#. Okay, so that's the arguments that generate file takes, and then we're going to do a system and send it the constant called pause. What this statement does right here is when the program finishes, it'll say press any key to continue. If you don't put that, then the window will just close on you and the user will be left wondering what the heck just happened.